Logamug. Why is it that despite their excellent skills / tools of manipulation and control, why have cults and similar high control groups managed to remain fairly insignificant? It sometimes feels like these groups should have no problem taking over countries, and yet they always seem to cap out early. Thank you very much for this. And I'm really glad you asked this question because it gives me the opportunity to highlight that I think you're looking a little too narrowly at what cults or high control destructive groups are and what they consist of. For example, let's talk about QAnon. Now, there is a group that is completely altering the landscape of the United States, and it is a lunatic fringe, tiny little group. The core of it, okay? Now, there's a lot of Americans who buy into various ideas that fit into the QAnon conspiracy theory, but that doesn't make them followers of Q or QAnons, right? It's you just because you believe there might be pedophiles in Hollywood or in DC, or that, some politicians are connected with Jeffrey Epstein and are clearly involved in some nasty stuff. That's kind of factual, right? So it's not like just because you have some idea that is vaguely connected to a QAnon conspiracy that you're a Q follower, but the core of that group are hardcore extremists and even radicalized people. And that's a small little group, and they are having a tremendous effect on the United States and on the political landscape of the United States. Let's talk about North Korea. That's an entire country that is a destructive cult. It has been 3 generations of destructive cult ever since the Kim family took over that country. And they are now gods in that country. And, they're not trying to take over the world, but who's the guy now? Kim Sung, whatever. That guy who's leading the country now, he ain't going anywhere, and he's got no idea that he's going to live a nice long life as a god figure running this country. That's his goal, that's his ambition, and that's all he needs, that's all he wants, and that's kind of big. To get more specific to answering your question, most cult leaders aren't trying to take over the world. They're not supervillains in the Marvel universe, right? They are just trying to, in fact, a lot of them just kind of fell into what they're doing. It wasn't, a plotted, premeditated sort of thing. They realize through the course of their life and through the opportunities that present themselves that they have the ability to manipulate other people, and that they have the ability to control or dominate other people. And using that and having a moral compass that swings kind of south, kind of evil, these kinds of people use those skills that they develop or go learn more about how to develop and use those skills in order to satisfy whatever needs they have. And those needs could be more sex, money, right, finances, domination, just for the sake of dominating people or controlling people, just to get off on watching their antics and pulling their strings and sort of being a puppet master. That's kind of a power kick for a lot of people who get into this. But they don't want to do it to the entire world. That's too much like work. These guys are an awful lot like your standard issue criminal. Pretty lazy. Criminals like the mafia, for example, are doing what they're doing because they don't want to go have a 9-to-5 job. Now, I'm not making blanket statements about every single criminal, so don't get me wrong here. I'm talking about like organized crime. I'm talking about cult activity. These kinds of people who do this kind of thing generally are not, and this is kind of interesting, but generally they are not really hard workers. They get other people to become hard workers for them, you see, and they are manipulating and controlling these people so they do their laundry, file their taxes, do all the work that they don't want to do. And you see this in organized crime as well. Some of these people are actually incapable of holding down a regular job like you and I have done. They actually can't do it. And so so the criminality becomes their path of least resistance, and or a cult leader becomes the path of least resistance for the person. And it just happens to match up with their skill set and the opportunities in the context of their existence, of their life. So that's how it tends to actually start. There's also situations where, like, let's talk about a martial arts dojo, and you have a sensei who starts a school. Well, he didn't necessarily start it with the intention of making it into a cult, but he finds that, being in a position of power over people, this feels kind of good, and then it gets, master slave, this kind of thing. I mean, things get out of hand kind of quickly, and before you know it, you got yourself a cult. So it can be premeditated, of course. I'm not trying to suggest it never happens through planning. Of course it does, but I'm also pointing out that it also happens through no planning, and that the people who get into this kind of thing are not necessarily trying to grow their group beyond 10, 20, 30 people. That's all they can handle, and they're happy dealing with that. And that gives them all the money, all the sex, all the power, all the control that they want. And they're satisfied. That's it. That's as far as they're going. Now, you get somebody like an L. Ron Hubbard. He wants to take over the world. He wants to slam his name into history. He wants to never, ever be forgotten. That was Hubbard's thing. That was the two things he seems to have been really trying to do with Scientology is fix his own nonsense, fix his own craziness that he knew he had, according to his own writings, and get his name, as he wrote to his first wife and said in a few places, slam his name into history, gain immortality. And he believed that occult methods and cult methods would be the way to make that happen. And he's been dead since 1986, and we're still talking about him. So, and he is one of the most, I think he's got the Guinness record for most translated author in the world. I mean, Hubbard's goals kind of were accomplished so far. And, and Scientology continues to exist. However, it is a shrinking thing because David Miscavige has different ideas. Miscavige isn't trying to really take over the world. Whatever Miscavige is trying to do, that's not what he's trying to do. He's using Scientology more to, satisfy his cravings, his whims. And I think he's more on the power trip. Hubbard was all about money, too. He was big on getting money. Miscavige is big on money. Actually, I think Miscavige is even bigger on money in some ways, mostly for that safety and security. And of course, underlying all of this, for every one of these people, cult leaders, criminals, all of it, but especially the cult leaders, fear. Fear is what drives almost all of this. Fear of other people, fear of being dominated, fear of being controlled, fear of being hurt or abused or even killed, right? These cult leaders are living in constant fear of that. And so they do what they do, for the most part, because it's kill or be killed, dominate or be dominated. I mean, they don't have real complicated, nuanced thinking going on when it comes to why they are doing what they're doing to people. And it's mostly comes out of a effort of self-protection. And this is at least theorized as, why narcissists are the way they are, why abusive tyrant type people are the way they are, is it's fear-based, right? So I wanted to comment on that too. You'll always find for almost every, I said all these guys, I always have to kind of go, okay, now I say stuff like that, but I got to pull it back because you'll always find exceptions to what I'm saying here. But I'm trying to give the bigger, broader, more general picture of what you would expect to find in the majority of cases. However, you will find exceptions to everything I've said, and that doesn't, invalidate what I'm saying. It's just kind of shows that the world's a complicated place, and so are people. And their motivations and reasons for doing things are multi-layered and complicated. But in the big picture, I think most of what I've said here is a correct answer to your question. So I hope that helps.